Hey guys, it's Quinn here, and I'm going to be doing another part of On My Honor with reading it, so let's get started. Chapter 4. Joel pushed off with a breaststroke. After a few of those, a couple more dog paddles, he gave up and put his face down so he could swim properly. He kept his eyes closed underwater, though. Every few strokes, he raised his head, glanced toward the sandbar, and relayed himself. The current was pushing him downstream, and if he wasn't careful, he would miss the sandbar entirely. He could hear Tony splashing wildly behind him, puffing and spilling water, his hands flailing. He couldn't figure out why he had never noticed what a poor swimmer Tony was before now. Joe touched bottom for a moment to catch his breath, peering back toward the riverbank, whipping the water from his face and trying to forget how dirty it was. Tony came to an educated stop behind him. Joel faced him. If you can't swim any better than that, you'll never make a swim team next year. Tony's chest was heaving. He's gasped for a breath if he had been swimming for miles. That's why I want to work out every day. You and me, I'll get better. We both will. How about working on out of the pool? Joel asked, feeling reasonable and somehow older than Tony, the way he's often did. It's cleaner. We won't get into trouble for going there. How about working out the middle of the main street? Tony replied. Then everybody can see. He was still breathing hard. What difference does it make if everybody sees? All the difference in the world. Do you want to Rundle and Schmidt noticing what we're doing? If they see, then we'll want you to try it for the team too. So let them try out. Who cares? Joe couldn't figure out what was going on. This wasn't like Tony. He was always everybody's friend. So much so that sometimes Joel couldn't help but feel a little bit jealous. Wanted to keep Tony to himself. Maybe Tony knew his form was bad and he was embarrassed. He probably never had lessons at the Y like most of the kids. And the last thing the world was ever willing to do was admit there wasn't something he didn't know. Joe can still remember the time Tony had claimed to be an expert at hang gliding. He jumped out of the upstairs window with a sheet tied to his wrists and ankles. Tony said afterward that the reason it hadn't worked was because he hadn't jumped for high enough. The doctor had said Tony was lucky to have gotten off with the only broken arm. Come on, Tony prodded. He said out to the sandbar. Are you giving up? You sure you'll make it? Joel's eyed his friends, still faintly having chest meaningfully. You look pretty tired of me. Tony gave him a shove, almost caught him off the balance. Swim. Come in, and Joel plunged into the water and resumed swimming. Tony started beside him and immediately dropped behind. Joel could hear him, and blowing and puffing like a whale. It's not so bad, Joel said to himself, beginning to dip his rhythm, discovering the angle that made it impossible to keep getting against the current. Maybe Tony was right, and this river swimming would be a good way to practice. Now that his father had decided that he was old enough to be allowed a bit of freedom, he started the stride stroke. He could watch where he was going better that way, keep tabs on how far he still had to go. He couldn't see Tony coming behind, but he didn't need to see him. He could tell he was there, because he sounded like an old paddle wheeler. Only about 20 more feet, Joe caught a toehold in the bottom of it for a second to look ahead. The water foamed and there eddied around the sandbars if there were more in a hurry there than other places. He put his head down and began to crawl, angling upriver against the current. He was gasping for breath each time he turned his head. He wasn't really tired, though a little nervous. Maybe the pool was always nearby. Something to grab onto. Still, he was a pretty good swimmer, and he was doing it all right. He might be good enough for the swim team by the time he got to the junior high in the fall. He He should have thought of practicing the river himself. It had been a good idea, but Tony was full of good ideas. When they both reached the sandbar, he would apologize, telling he was sorry for what he said about his dad, telling me was sorry for Tony would be afraid of Slim and would wave too. Sorry, that was my mom. Maida, he called out when his hand scraped bottom with its brush to his sandbar. He stood up, and I beat you too. There was no answer. Joel turned to check. Behind him stretched the river, smooth and glistening, reddish brown. There was no sign of Tony. There was nothing to indicate that Joel wasn't alone. Had to come into water alone to start with, except of course he hadn't. He started to walk back, pushing through the water impatiently, as if he really crowd holding him back. "Tony," he yelled, "where are you?" A faint echo of his own voice, hiding like the insects meowing of the cat, bounced back at him for bluffs, but there was no other reply. Joe kept walking forward, pushing into the wall of the water. Maybe Tony had turned back. Maybe he was hiding in the bushes somewhere along the bank, waiting for him to come unglued. "All right, Tony Zabrinsky, I know your tricks. Come out, whoever you are." There was no answer, not even giggle for bushes or some rustling. "To go on you, Tony, if you mess with my clothes," but he could see his clothes, a pile of them, lying where he had left them, his red t-shirt, make a mark in the spotlight. "Tony." He began moving forward with lunges, gasping for breath, half choking. Tony had to be hiding. He had to be just off to the side somewhere, laughing. There was no other possibility. It was when Joel stepped off in the nothingness of the deep water of a river bottom, suddenly gone beneath his feet as he had hit the black hole in space that he knew as he choked and found his way to the surface. But he understood everything. Tony couldn't swim, not really, and Tony had gone under. Chapter 5. Joel treaded the water for another few seconds, looking frother detectively since the snivers of a river. There was nothing there, no faint difference in appearance of the water, nothing to give a hint of a danger. What across the hole? Where did Tony go under? Would he still be carried when he went down? Or would he currently have carried him away by now? How long can a person be underwater and still live? Comment down below how long can you be underwater, so comment down below how long. Just type it down below. The question came into Joel and Mirage, leaving no space for answers, if there were any answers. There wasn't time to wait for them anyway. They made a lunging dive, pulling himself forward and under with both arms, his eyes open, smarting in the murky water. He couldn't see more than a few inches in front of his face, so he reached in every direction with his hands as he swam, feeling for an arm, a leg, a bit of hair, anything. He found nothing until he touched something slimy and rotten on the bottom and sprang to his surface. He ducked under the water again, reaching on every side, looking and feeling under the river, until the river sang in his ears and he burst through the light, pulling raggedly for air. The current had pulled Tony's downstream. He let the river carry him, and a few feet farther on and tried again. Nothing. When Joel dove for the fourth time, letting the current carry him farther and further shore, he found himself caught in the grip at that hurling water. It sucked at him, running him against the silty river bottom. As he struggled to rise, grasping the water with both hands, he could pull himself by it. His hand touched something solid. Was it Tony floating just above him? He trudged toward the object, only to have a current draw for his reach. Then he was swirling, spinning, being pulled toward the bottom again, while the dark bullet-shaped object pivoted about him, face down into the muddy water. Tony was dead. Dead. And Joel was going to die. Too, he couldn't breathe. His lungs were in sharp pain. The air came rushing for his chest with an explosion. And the water rushed into his taking its place, the form of written above him brushed against him in the arm and side. It was rough, hard. No human body, it was Wog. Joe grabbed hold and his head broke through the white dazzled surface just as his body gave to him wetness. He waited for a few minutes, coughing, spitting water, bringing move without any assistance on his part of eddying whirlpool to his slower, straighter current close to the riverbank. When the river bottom came up to his feet, he stood. The sky was an intermediate china bowl. Above his head, a single bird sang for a nearby tree. "Shut up, Joel," wanted to shout. "You shut up. You just shut up." But he didn't say anything. Instead, he bent over double volume a sea of water. Strange that river in a small amounts looked clean. Joel could see everything with sharp, terrible clarity. The river water he vomited. The bare roots of the tree thrust above the water, the steady progress of the river. Toward where did it go? Toward the Illinois River. The Illinois River emptied into Mississippi, didn't it? They had studied rivers in school, but he couldn't remember. He looked around and said nothing to disturb the smooth surface of the water, and nothing skulked along the bank. No hidden form. He might have only been the only human being alive in the entire world. If he found Tony, if he found him hiding somewhere on the bank, he would beat him to a bloody pulp. He would never speak to him again, never do anything with him again. It was a dirty trick, the dirtiest trick Tony had ever pulled. The shiver convulsed Joel, though the sun was still bright and hot. He began to move woodenly toward the spot where he had left his clothes he would get dressed in, and he stood there over his pile of clothes. Tony's clothes were scattered on the ground, exactly where he had dropped them. Tony had gone out the water. Not even Tony would be turning around, wetting around, stark naked, just for a joke. Joel turned back to the face to the river again, squinting against the sunlight that glinted off the rippling surface. It was impossible. It couldn't be. It was all a terrible dream for which he couldn't be awake in any moment. Far above him, a car rumbled across the bridge. "Wait!" Joe screamed, coming out of a trance which he had been standing on over Tony's clothes. "Stop! Help!" He ran over towards the bridge, flailing his arms, but the car was too far for anyone to hear, to see. It moved smoothly up to the hill on the other side of the bridge. Tony stopped in his tracks, trembling his teeth, chattering in erratic bursts, then ran back to his clothes. He grabbed his jeans for a pile. One of his underpants and shirt tumbled to the ground. His hands shook so violently that he could barely hold the jeans up and step into them. The heavy material stuck against his wet skin. He tried to step his feet into his sneakers, gave up, began to run towards the highway, still struggling with the fast-turning jeans. There would be another car coming up there had to be. As he ran, he paid no attention to where he stepped. He looked down once, after tripping and picking himself up, to see his big toe was bleeding. It might have been someone else's toe. He felt nothing, as the thistle beneath his left foot only made him move faster. Up the hill, his lungs pumping, the air seemed to have told him back exactly as the water had earlier. At the side of the highway, he double over vomited again. Then he stood erect. He had to get help. Maybe Tony would still be safe if he got help. The road climbed away to the river on each side. Empty, bare, there was a single car or truck in view. The only movement anywhere was a black crow wheeling behind the sky. Joe turned toward the home and began to run blindly up the middle of the highway. He could feel the river just behind him, a presence of working monster waiting for prawns, a monster that swallowed boys. Joel increased his speed, his heart hammering against the ribs, his bare feet swapping against the dark pavement. Chapter 6. Joel was halfway up to the hill before another car crested the slight rise at the top and started toward him. It was a big Old bolt of the car, blue with silver fenders, and red and orange flame painted on the hood. Joe planted himself in the middle of the lane, waving his arms. Blue car served his horse opposite of the road, and he longed to stay in its path, determined not to let it get away. The car came in the screeching, vibrating hot inches for extended arms. What in the hell do you think you're doing? The driver yelled. He was a teenage boy, probably 18 or 19, with a lot of dark hair and a bare, muscular arms. Please, Joe. Please, Joe gasped, but then he couldn't say any more. He stood double over the car's head, trying to catch his breath, trying to get his words fast past his throat. Please, he repeated. The kid looked sick, the blonde girl said. She was sitting next to a boy, so close that she could have been sharing the driving. She leaned forward as she spoke, peering through the windshield at Joel. In the river, he managed to stay, pointing, please come. What is in the river? The boy asked. Attentive now. What you're talking about? Joel shook his head, unable to speak again. His face felt numb. You meant somebody drowning or something. The boy leaned forward, gripping the wheel. Joel nodded dumbly. Get in, the driver ordered. Reaching back and swinging, the door opened for Joel. Joel stumbled around the car and slid into the back seat, pulling the door shut again. The bold girl turned and stared, her mouth working methodically around the wad of purple gum. She looked scared. The car started up with a screeching of tires, barreled down the road, and skidded to a stop of the gravel shoulder, but just before the bridge. Who was he said this? Said it is, the boy demanded. Already out of the car, jerking open Joel's door. A friend of yours? Yeah. Joel said, finding a bit of voice as he climbed out of the car. His name's Tony. Where'd he go in? I'll show you, Joel said, as he headed the riverbank of a stumbling run. The bigger boy ran beside him, the girl next to a boy, her hands fluttering in front of her like large muffs. The sight of a river had the faint dead fish smell of it, made Joel's knees buckle when he got to the bank again. The boy grabbed his arms and held him up. Here, he asked, setting Joel back on his feet. There was a place where it gets deep, right about there. Joel pointed the direction where the spot where he had thought Tony had gone down. The boy pulled off his shirt. How did he get in there anyway? He asked. We were swimming out of the sandbar. When I looked back, he wasn't there. I tried to find him. I really did. But Joel choked as he spoke, his chest having him as something like a sob, but he wasn't crying. His eyes were perfectly dry. And though he was shaking inside, he was frozen in a dead calm. The boy had kicked off his shoes and his jeans. He stepped into the river and he paused, squinting at the muddy water. Then this is clothes? The girl asked, approaching with Tony's blue shirt cradled in her arms as she thought she had rescued Tony. Yet Jill answered, resisting into a post to keep her hands off Tony's face. The boy plunged into the water, skimming beneath the surface, humping off the diving more deeply still. You be careful, the girl called toward the place where the boyfriend had disappeared. Joel and the girl stood side by side. Joel wondered for a moment if he should be back in the water looking too, but the memory of his son pulling at him, holding him down, turned his legs to his lead, couldn't move toward the river again. The boy was going to find Tony anyway, but Joel was certain of it. For the first time, the boy surfaced. Joel called out excitedly, Tony! The teenager's hands were empty, and the Joel stifled a second more forlorn cry. The stirring probably took him that way, Joel called, pointing toward the bridge. The boy nodded to dunk under. Again, something farther out of his time and entering downriver 10 or 15 feet. He stayed in with it, turning in every direction, diving again and again until his chest heaved and staggered when he stood. His girlfriend passed on a bank, cracking her gums steadily. Be careful, she said ostensibly. I can't say it. How do I say these words? Sensationally, I can't say it. More to the surrounding area to her friend. You won't find anything there, she called desperately when he slammed almost in the middle of the river once. He wouldn't have gone to that far out, but what if he did? Joe demanded, and the girl did not answer. She looked as if she were about to cry. Joel stood up to the bank, called helpful directions, but finally decided Joel encouraging Sutton to try. Just a bit farther down, the boy began to wade toward shore. His head was lowered so the water was chinning. His hair went dripped to his eyes. You aren't quitting, aren't you? Joel asked for knowledge that he had quit already, lying heavy in his gut. Yeah, the boy gasped, but picking up his shirt, wiping his face with it, I'm quitting. But you can't, Joel wailed. You just can't. The boy shrugged. He spoke between deep, quavering breaths. Look, do you know how long it takes somebody to drown? Joel didn't answer. He had thought about it. Besides, he didn't want to know. About 5 minutes, I would say. The boy bent over, resting his hands on his knees. About 5 lousy minutes. More deep breaths, maybe even less. Joe turned away, walking out along a bank of a few feet. The boy's voice followed him. The boy was beginning to breathe normally now, and the words came out in watered clumps. And how long is it before you even got me down here? 10 minutes? 15? Joel couldn't respond. And do you know, the boy went on, straightening up slowly, how hard it is to find anything in a river like this? Like how fast our current would pull somebody along. Maybe next week a body washed up at one of the dams, or next month. We're not looking for a body, Joel said, turning back fiercely. It's Tony we're looking for. The boy uses his shirt to shear the water off his chest and arms. He shook his head. Sorry, kid, he said. Joel went rigid. What was this guy saying? Sorry. What was he sorry about? He didn't even know Tony. Dumb kids, the boy muttered as he tugged on his jeans. You shouldn't have been swimming in the river in the first place. You both should have known better. Didn't anyone tell how dangerous rivers are? He stuffed his feet into his shoes, wrung his wet shirt out. Well, he said, you better finish getting dressed and come with me. Now it was Joel who was beginning to have trouble breathing. Where are you going? He asked. To the police station? The boy's voice was harsh, angry, as if he blamed Joel for what happened. Then when somebody drowns, he got to report it to the police. When somebody drowns, the words reverberated through Joel's skull like a scream, but he only repeated dully, the police? Stared at his own feet. What would the police say? They want to know that Joel and Tony had been doing in the river in the first place? They would want to know that Joel had done with his friend that way. Maybe he could call his dad at work first before he went to the police station. His dad would be good at explaining things. His dad would. What would he do? You're on your honor. Joel. That's what he said. You'll be careful the whole way. You won't go anywhere except the park. And now Joel had proved what his honors was worth. What he was worth. Come on, kid, the boy said, and his voice was still rough. It was unkind. It wasn't unkind. He knew he had sort of questions the police would ask. What Joe's fathers would say could tell the boy was feeling sorry for him. No, Joel said, shaking his head vigorously and pulling his shirt. You go on. I got my bike here. I'll go report it to the police. No sense you getting involved. He's right, the girl said. She held her chin up and spoke with the authority through whom there were tears running down her cheeks. There was no sense. Besides, if we're going back to the town, I might get into trouble. I called in sick to work today, remember? I got with you. She placed her X's and her finger in the middle of the boy's chest. But it's gotta be reported, the boy said stubbornly. And the kid's parents have been told too. At first, Joel thought the boy was talking about his parents, about telling his father and mother. But then he realized the boys meant that Zabrisky's. Joel had known about Tony's parents until now. For instance, he imagined Zabrisky's doorbell and he saw Mrs. Zabrinsky, for her face tired, her eyes already sad, coming to the door. When the door opened, thought it was Mr. Zabrinsky standing there. It was heavy, weather-veiled. In his hand, Joe could feel the cold sweat breaking out his sides. If the police didn't get him, Tony's father would for sure. I'll go to the police, he said, I promise. Chapter 7. Joe leaned into his bike and pushing as hard as he could. Almost running up the hill is heard drumming his ears. The boy and his girlfriend were still sitting in the car, probably arguing about whether or not going to the police. He was crushing him behind the road, McMahon's skin between shoulders. Joe's shoulders blade up to the back of his neck felt tight and bunchy. When the car finally pulled away, one would cross a bridge and opposite the hill. Joe quit pushing and dropped across the handlebars, gasping for breath. After a few minutes looked at the back, the car was gone, the heat was off the empty road. He began to push his bike again, more slowly now when he was 3/4 of the way to the top. A small red car crested the hill and started toward him. Joel straightened up, freezing his features into what he hoped was imaginative innocence of nonchalance. Still, when the car passed, when he had to turn away, the people got into the car to get a look at his face, they would turn no. The mother had always told him that he was the worst keeper of guilty secrets in the world. When he was a little kid, if he walked past her and would snitch his cookies in his pocket, she would take one out of his seat and say, Joe, what do you have in your pocket? Now everyone was going to look at him and say, Joe, why did you go swimming in the river? What did you do to your best friend? And what kind of questions would the police ask? What would they guess without even asking? Joel stopped in his tracks. His heart beginning to hammer again. He couldn't go back. He just couldn't. He jerked his bike around, facing down the hill and away from town, away from police. But Zabrinsky, his parents, he climbed on, standing all with all his weight, one pedal so that his rear is fishtailed as he moved out. But Tony would build up enough speed to make it on top of the other side of the valley without having to get off once to push. His father had given him permission to ride his bike all the way to the Starved Rock State Park. He was going to ride all to the park. The one of fire measured the tops of Joel's thighs. He pedaled steadily, glancing neither to the right nor the left, images flashing through his brain. The woods of the park were dense. He could hide his bike easily, then instead maybe he could even find a cave in the bluffs. Maybe he could stay in. Get with on berries and roots the way Indians have done. They had hidden out of the Starved Rock and bluff to get away from enemy tribe. But he couldn't do that. They were footpaths and fences on the tufts of boughs now. Tourists, too. Anyway, an enemy tribe had trapped Indians up there, strapped them to death, and giving the park its name. Basima rose past the suction of the high, huge wheels, tugging the Joe on his bicycle. All you would need to do is what he was in his grip. The truck would take care of his rest. Joel stopped pedaling, steering onto his shoulder. He dropped heavily out of his bike. What was he doing? Did he really think he was going to hide out? As he would find some ways to hide in, how long he could stay until he grew up or died. But it wasn't his fault, was it? Just because he didn't follow his father's orders, that didn't make what happened to his Tony his fault. His father was the one who said it is alright to ride the park in its first place. Joel hadn't even wanted to go. And there was Tony, crazy Tony, insisting on swimming in the river when he couldn't even swim that well. Joel expelled a long breath. He felt lighter. Somehow he glanced both ways, then walked his bike across the road and started back to the direction he had came from. He would go home. There was no belong, no matter what happened. He began to pedal again. He's fighting to hide his gear so the least movement and his heart poured in farthest home. The narrow tires sang against the pavement home. There was one thing he needed, though. He needed to decide what to tell his parents and the Zabrinskys they asked about Tony. He could tell them off and Tony had started to ride a bike and Starved Rock. He could tell them that Tony had stopped where the crossing the bridge was so hot. The river was there and cool and wet. Tony was wanting to go swimming. It was the truth, wasn't it? Then you could tell him how he tried to talk Tony out with the going to the river. He could explain that Tony wouldn't listen because Tony never listened once he made up his mind. But then Joel would remind his father of the promise he had made in the morning. He would say that he told Tony he couldn't go down the river with him. He told Tony that he was ready on a start up by himself. The day was hot, and though it wasn't that much fun riding so far without Tony, he turned without around to come back. The explanation summed himself in Joe's mind, logical and complete. Why hadn't he thought it before? The way it made him run away. He loosened his clenched fingers, and one at a time, from the handle grips, then kept pedaling towards home. When he arrived toward the ridge out overlooking the Vermilion River again, he stopped instead of the road. The bridge walled the wall of trees, nearly obscuring the water. If only there was some other way to get home. He didn't know another route in town, though. Besides, the fire in his eyes had moved into his calves and shoulders were cramped, and any other route home would undoubtedly be longer than this one. Joe squeezed the handbrakes and just creeped down to the slip pallet over the bridge. Brake pits squealing lightly against the wheels. The Tony had steamed behind to go swimming. That was what Joel would tell everybody, but he had really written on Starved Rock when Tony had gone down the water. Excuse me. He would have stopped a bit, checking with Tony on the way back. Because he wouldn't know. Joe reached the bridge, still holding the bike under tight control. Then he pulled slowly across, keeping his eyes carefully on the road. Then the other side, he insisted, stopped and wheeled his bike on an embankment. He propped it against the undersculpture of the bridge. He would just check, and so people wouldn't even look at his face when he explained how he even checked. Tony's BMX was still there, carefully obscured in the long grass. Joe walked slowly toward the riverbank, keeping his mind carefully blank, and the whole thing happened away. He had figured it out, and it all made sense. The squirrel scored in a nearby tree. The river made the boring sound as all so were laughing. They wore Tony clothes in haphazardly along the ground, and they would have been dropped except for the shirt of a girl and moved. One saw cuddly the nearby bush, the other way in the midst of a patch of violets. Sighing over Tony's carelessness, Joe gathered up his clothes, folded them, put them in a neat pile. He folded the pale blue shirt last and laid it on the top of the rest. They survived of the result of his work. Something was wrong. Tony had never folded his clothes in his life, not unless his mother was standing over him anyway. Joe reached down and mussed the shirt. As he strained up the gleaming surface of water, he caught his gaze. The river was unchanged, innocent. For an instant, Joy couldn't breathe. His throat closed, and the air was trapped in his chest as painful lamp. He lifted his hands in surprise and supplication, and when the breath exploited him again, it would brought him with a bleeding moan. Joel stood on a bank, clutching himself the swaying. Tony was dead. Dead. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there, and I'm gonna say that for like part 3 or something. I'm gonna see what I can do. So I'll see you guys later, and see ya. Peace.